Okay, let's unpack this. We're diving into a whole stack of sources today.
Yeah, quite a mix. We've got news reports, Fox, Al Jazeera, ABC, CNN, and then also discussions from Reddit, like Our Conservative, Our Politics.
In the core story, it's all focused on these recent events in Los Angeles. Escalating anti-ICE protests. Some serious clashes with authorities.
And the really big one, the president deploying the National Guard to LA. But here's the key thing. Without the governor's permission.
Right, that's a major point. So what's fascinating here, looking at these sources, is you get these really different takes, right? Not just different angles, but almost different realities about what happened and why it matters.
Exactly. So our mission in this deep dive is to kind of cut through that, pull out the important bits, the events, who said what, and how it's all being framed and debated.
Yeah, we're navigating the conflicting viewpoints straight from the material you've got. We're not here to pick sides, just to help you understand the different narratives out there.
Think of it as, a shortcut to getting informed on this really complex, really charged situation. Some surprising details in here, too.
Okay, so let's jump in. The scene in Los Angeles, how do the sources describe things actually unfolding?
Well, the report suggests it started with anti-ICE protests, immigration and customs enforcement. These seem to escalate over the weekend.
Centered initially where Paramount.
Yeah, Paramount in LA County. That's where protesters reportedly had direct clashes with federal authorities, including ICE officers themselves.
And it didn't just stay there, did it? The unrest, it spread.
No, definitely not. We see reports across different sources, ABC, CNN talking about damage, rioters apparently smashing windows at the LAPD headquarters, West 1st Street.
And authorities responding.
Yeah, officials deployed tear gas downtown. Reports mention agitators clashing with authorities there.
Which led to the LAPD, what was the term?
Declaring an unlawful assembly. That was downtown Sunday night. They reported that, quote, agitators have splintered, and police were trying to disperse crowds in multiple spots.
Got it. And protesters were moving around.
Apparently, yeah. Marching into the LA Live area, blocking streets like Figueroa and 11th.
And some sources, like Fox News, highlighted some pretty striking visuals, right?
Yeah, definitely. Protesters filmed burning American flags, spitting on them, chanting anti-Trump slogans. That was over the weekend.
And it wasn't just LA.
No, sources mentioned arrests up in San Francisco, too. Over 60 people arrested there, also during protests against immigration raids.
And a reporter got hit.
Yeah, CNN specifically mentioned a reporter being hit with a rubber bullet during the LA events.
Okay, so LAPD asked people to report damage. Looting, vandalism.
Right, they even asked for photos before cleanup. But what's interesting, like you mentioned earlier, a CNN source pointed out, there weren't actually that many specific reports of looting coming in, despite the LAPD's request.
So a bit of a discrepancy there maybe, or at least a nuance the sources pick up on?
Exactly. Now, this is where things take a really unusual turn, according to pretty much all the sources.
The federal response.
The federal response. President Trump federalizes the National Guard, sends 2,000 troops into Los Angeles.
And the crucial part again, without Governor Newsom signing off. No request from the state.
Right. Described across the board as highly unusual. Very few precedents in modern U.S. history.
The main comparison everyone brings up is 1965, right? LBJ.
Yeah, LBJ invoking the Insurrection Act in Alabama, protecting civil rights marchers against Governor Wallace. But, as the sources emphasize, that was a very different context than protests over immigration policy.
Totally different situation. So when did the troops start arriving?
Sunday morning, and Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem put out a statement saying their purpose was safety around buildings, for peaceful protesters, and for law enforcement.
Meanwhile, President Trump on Truth Social
called it a great decision, claimed LA would have been, quote, completely obliterated without the Guard, and said they'll always do what's needed to keep citizens safe.
Okay, so federal deployment, strong words from the president. Unsurprisingly, this kicks off a huge political firestorm.
Oh, yeah. And this is where the framing in the sources really diverges.
Let's start with Governor Newsom, his reaction.
Sharp, immediate. Accused Trump directly of fanning the flames, making things worse, called him unhinged.
And on social media.
He posted that a president calling for a sitting governor's arrest was a day he hoped never to see in America. Called it a line we cannot cross, a step toward authoritarianism.
Wow. He didn't mince words?
Not at all. He reportedly taunted Trump's border czar, Tom Homan, saying, "Come and get me, tough guy," vowed to keep standing up for California.
And he mentioned legal action.
Yes, told MSNBC he plans to sue the Trump administration to try and roll back the deployment. Called it illegal, immoral, unconstitutional. And he specifically asked Trump to return command of the Guard to him, to the state.
And he went down to L.A.
Visited Sunday evening,
Yeah.
Met with state emergency officials. Said he was there to keep the peace, not play into Trump's political games.
And one slick mentioned him floating the idea of withholding federal taxes.
Yeah, as a potential response to Trump's threats against California. A pretty provocative idea.
Okay, so that's Newsom's side. What about President Trump's reaction, as presented in the sources?
Equally forceful. Called the people involved professional agitators, insurrectionists, bad people. Said they should be in jail.
And he targeted Newsom and Mayor Bass specifically.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Referred to Newsom as Gavin Newscomb. Said they should be thanking him, saying, "You're wonderful, sir," instead of, as he put it, lying and calling the protests peaceful. He pointed to photos and videos of violence and destruction as his proof.
And the White House backed him up.
Caroline Leavitt, a White House official, defended it. Said Trump stepped in for law and order, protect federal buildings. And she criticized Newsom, saying he did nothing.
The sources also connect this to broader policy, right? The One Big Beautiful Bill.
Mm-hmm. Funding for thousands more IC personnel, customs officers, Border Patrol agents, aiming to remove at least 1 million illegal immigrants a year, reportedly.
And the Department of Homeland Security, DHS, they were active too.
Very active in shaping the narrative. They focused heavily on justifying the original ICE raids. They released details about one man arrested, Quang Chan Phan.
What did they say about him?
Called him a 49-year-old illegal immigrant from Vietnam, a cold-blooded killer. They cited a 1994 LA Times report about his second-degree murder conviction linked to a mass shooting years ago.
And they used this case to criticize Newsom and Bass.
Directly, DHS put out a statement saying, essentially, this criminal illegal alien is who Newsom, Bass, and the rioters are protecting over U.S. citizens.
Strong language from DHS.
Very. Assistant Secretary Tricia McLaughlin called it sickening that they were, in her view, prioritizing violent criminals over Americans. Emphasized the risks ICE officers take.
And DHS used social media, too.
Posted on X after the unrest, Called on California politicians to call off their rioting mob. Asked why Newsom was siding with foreign criminals. Said federal law enforcement was protecting citizens from criminal illegal aliens.
Did the post include visuals?
Reportedly, yes. A video showing a masked, shirtless man with a Mexican flag and a burning vehicle. Clearly framing the situation in a specific way, connecting protests, criminality, foreign elements.
Okay, so beyond Trump and Newsom, other groups weighed in.
Definitely. You had U.S. Representative Pramila Jayapal speaking at a rally in D.C., supporting David Huerta, an SEIU union leader arrested during the protests.
What was her take?
Called the Guard deployment an intentional distraction, an authoritarian power grab. Called for freeing Huerta and others, ending IC raids, defending free speech.
And the unions themselves, SEIU and UFW.
Strong condemnations. SEIU demanded Huerta's release, an end to raids they say tear communities apart. Planned more rallies. UFW United Farm Workers called the deployment reckless, a violent attack on all Californians. Said immigrant workers are the lifeblood of the state, and the real threat was militarized forces.
Any international reaction noted?
The UN spokesman Farhan Haq called for state, local, federal authorities to work together, warned against further militarization.
And separately, the State Department mentioned a travel ban.
Yeah, for visitors from 12 countries. Framed as necessary for national security, public safety, part of that broader immigration context.
Which prompted pushback.
The New York Immigration Coalition rallied against it, called it a continuation of policies that separate families, create fear.
And there was that local decision in Glendale.
Right, near L.A. Glendale decided to end its contract, allowing federal agencies to house immigration detainees in the local jail. Cited public perception, city values like transparency, community trust, shows the local impact and concerns.
Okay, so digging into all these accounts, one of the biggest things that jumps out is just the fight over the words themselves. How do you even describe what happened?
Absolutely. Is it a riot or a protest? That debate is central. You see it everywhere in the sources and online.
Some sources, Fox News, DHS, consistently use riot, rioters, unlawful assembly, violent. They point to the smashed windows, the burning vehicles, the flags.
Right. That's their evidence. But then other sources, like Al Jazeera, mention a planned peaceful gathering. And you see lots of commenters, especially on Reddit, really pushing back, insisting on protest.
How do they argue that?
They might say the damage was exaggerated or minimal compared to the number of protesters, or, crucially, that any violence wasn't the main group, but specific agitators, maybe opportunists, maybe even outside groups trying to make the protest look bad.
And the Reddit threads show people actually debating the definitions.
Explicitly, what makes something a riot versus a protest? Comparing it to other events, January 6th, Kenosha. It gets really granular.
Some commenters even called the riot label political speak.
Yeah, terms like fascist speak or Orwellian doublespeak pop up, the argument being it's used intentionally to shut down legitimate dissent against government actions.
And related to that is the looting question. Reports mentioned it, LAPD asked about it.
But online, big debate about how much actually happened and who did it. Was it just random people taking advantage? Or, some even suggest, potentially provoked by outside groups? Those false flag kind of theories appear.
Which ties into the optics, the symbols people focused on?
Definitely. The Mexican flags being waved while property damage occurred, that sparked a lot of online debate. Commenters calling it terrible optics, questioning who was being represented, suggesting it hurt the message or hinted at outside influence.
And the American flag burning, obviously a powerful symbol too.
And then there's the outside agitator idea. Trump used the term professional agitators.
CNN pointed out the history of that term, right? Implying it's not genuine local anger.
Exactly. Though CNN also noted, realistically, opportunists or agitators can sometimes join protests. It's complicated.
And online commenters really ran with the agitator idea.
Oh, yeah. Debating if they were involved, who might be paying them, theories about Soros, Proud Boys, Nazis, even Russian or Chinese bots stirring things up. It covered the whole spectrum.
Okay, so let's zoom out a bit. Connect these immediate events and the language debates to the bigger picture. It's all rooted in immigration, isn't it?
Deeply. The trigger was those sweeping immigration raids in L.A. And DHS, as we saw, really focused on the criminal history of people like Kwangshan Fan to justify those raids and hit back at Newsom and base.
Trying to frame it as targeting criminals?
Precisely. But online discussions push back on that narrative. Commenters argue, look, many undocumented people came legally first, then got stuck in a broken system waiting years for status changes. It's not always black and white.
And raises questions about due process, constitutional rights.
Right. Some sources and commenters claim ICE might be disregarding rights, maybe targeting people waiting for hearings, maybe even citizens or people with legal status accidentally. That Glendale decision to end its IC contract, that reflects these kinds of community trust concerns.
Beyond immigration, the other huge context is federal versus state power.
Yeah, the National Guard deployment without the governors, okay, that's a rare flashpoint.
Newsom frames it as states' rights being violated, federal overreach into local matters.
And online, people bring up the legal angle. The Posse Comitatus Act, the law limiting military use in domestic law enforcement.
Commenters noted some politicians seem to have shifted their stance on this kind of thing.
Yeah, pointing to past comments by figures like Kristi Noem versus her support for Trump now suggests politics might be driving the legal arguments for some.
And the framing of this federal action itself is split.
Totally. On one side, you hear authoritarianism, Trump police state, fascism, especially in left-leaning forums. On the other, often in conservative spaces, it's seen as necessary, justified federal action to restore law and order where local officials failed.
And people constantly compare this to past events.
All the time. January 6th, the 90s LA riots, BLM protests, Kenosha, even Ruby Ridge, Waco. These comparisons aren't just history lessons. They're used as arguments to say this is just as bad as X or this is nothing like Y or the authorities acted like they did back then.
Finally, some online discussion touched on maybe deeper underlying factors.
A few threads suggested it's not just about the raids. Maybe economic hardship, job insecurity, potential cuts to safety nets are creating desperation, contributing to the unrest.
And theories about foreign interference.
Yeah, mentions of foreign governments maybe using online platforms to amplify division.
Yeah.
Just adding another layer of complexity to consider in this environment.
Okay, so stepping back, looking across this whole range of sources, what's the big takeaway?
It's not just about reporting events. It's about a battle over the meaning of those events. What do you even call it? How do you frame it?
Right. You've got this fundamental clash, federal versus state authority on managing public order, especially around federal enforcement like ICE.
And this incredibly sharp political fight, the administration focusing on law and order, criminality, the governor focusing on constitutional rights, protest rights, accusing the feds of overreach and escalation.
And underneath it all, the public discourse, especially online, is grappling with those basic questions. Riot or protest? Who are these people? Are outsiders involved? And the answers really shape how you see the whole thing.
Yeah, this deep dive shows it's this complex weave, right? Immediate events, political moves, deep disagreements on immigration and governing, and these competing stories trying to win people over.
Here's where it gets really interesting, something for you to chew on. The sources present such a stark contrast. Is this necessary federal power putting down criminals and agitators?
Or is it a local community reacting to federal overreach, questionable enforcement, maybe even provoked by the federal response itself?
How does seeing that fundamental conflict over framing, laid out so differently across these news reports and online discussions, shape your understanding of this tension between federal power and state authority when it comes to handling protests and unrest in America today?